In the Pokemon universe, the art of battling is one that almost feels like a requirement. If you choose not to partake, well, you're kind of going against the spirit of Pokemon as a whole. As the centerpiece of the series, Game Freak has consistently featured new ways to evolve the dynamics of Pokemon battling. Some of these additions were short-lived and unpopular, such as triple and rotation battles, and others, like abilities and the physical special split, became game-changing staples that still thrive to this day. But arguably the biggest addition ever were held items. These introduced a whole new dimension to the customization of your Pokemon, allowing them to gain extra perks that could completely shift the tide in your favor. Unfortunately, not all items were created equally, whether that be due to just being useless or becoming obsolete by a later feature. Some have been forever lost to time, it seems. Today, I want to take a look at a few of these items and see what changes could be realistically made to give them just a small edge in the battling scene. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe. It helps out a lot. But anyway, let's jump in to the world of useless Pokemon items. To start things off, let's take a look at an item that you might have not even heard of before, despite being introduced all the way back in Generation 4, the Sticky Barb. For some weird reason, this item has always been either extremely difficult to get or a one-off gift item from a random NPC. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, you could get it from a random man in the Veilstone department store, but in pretty much every game after that, the only way of obtaining a Sticky Barb is by getting lucky through fishing or from Wild Pharaoh Seed and Cacnea. The worst part is, it's not even good. Whoever holds it loses 1/8 of their health every turn, and anyone who attacks the holder with the contact move receives it, meaning that they now take damage every turn. It sounds kind of cool and fun, but why use it when better items like the Rocky Helmet and Status Orbs exist? I think a simple way of improving the Sticky Barb is to make it stand out from the two orbs mentioned. Toxic deals exponential damage, and Burn halves attack, so maybe Sticky Barb could also lower the opponent's speed by one stage if the holder is hit by a contact move, kind of like an injury to the Pokemon's limbs after charging into the item. It could also have its own status effect, which lowers the holder's defense by one stage, and deals 1/16 of your total HP each turn, allowing you to pass on the status via trick or being hit by a contact move. This would make it an actually threatening item to worry about. However, since you have to be holding the Sticky Barb first, you're at risk of being knocked out before you can pass on the item thanks to that defense drop. You can use it as a form of speed control against physical attackers or as a way to soften up enemies. It'd be pretty cool to see what strategies people could come up with. Recovery items are an interesting subcategory of held items in Pokemon. You have some that are just terrible in a normal playthrough, like the Oranberry and Berry Juice. Others that could be useful in some situations, such as the Citrus Berry, and some that passively heal every turn, like the Leftovers and Black Sludge, which tend to be very commonly used. But then there's the Shell Bell, an awkward middle ground. In its debut games, Ruby and Sapphire, it was obtained by collecting shoal salts and shells from Shoal Cave. Unfortunately, the payoff from waiting for the tide to rise and fall is not at all worth it. The Shell Bell heals the holder by 1/8 of the damage it deals with an attack, which sounds pretty good on paper, a little broken even on a Pokemon like a Sweeper. However, 1/8 is a lot less than you'd think, and in most cases, the health that you heal with the Shell Bell will be lower or barely equal to the health restored by Leftovers, which always heals you every turn. To give Shell Bell an actual niche, instead of just 1/8 of the damage dealt being restored, it's a third. Yeah, that sounds like a huge buff, but let's think about it. If you're a Sweeper, that regeneration isn't going to matter much because you're probably frail anyway. If you're a tank, you're not dealing much damage in the first place, so Leftovers will still be the better healing option. The main niche this will give is to be an anti-recoil item. moves like Brave Bird and Flare Blitz will become essentially recoilless, and moves like Wild Charge and Takedown will heal you a bit instead. Of course, you still have to have enough health to live the recoil before healing, so I think it's pretty balanced, and definitely way more useful than the sad item that we have right now. Speed is arguably the most important stat in Pokemon. After all, it dictates who goes first in a battle. So if a Pokemon has a low speed stat, it's almost always going to have to take a hit before doing anything, like healing, boosting stats, or just attacking. While many slow Pokemon do have high defensive stats to counteract the issue, there are some that are left frail and slow, or in other words, utterly helpless. Interestingly though, there are a few items that intentionally make you slow, being the Macho Brace, Iron Ball, and Lagging Tail. The Macho Brace was originally meant as a way to gain EVs, or in other words, boost stat growth, while having your speed. The Iron Ball also has speed, but also makes flying types grounded, so they can get hit by ground type moves. And then finally, there's the Lagging Tail, which, well, makes you go last. That's it. I think these three items could have some extra small effects that would make them niche, but kind of usable picks. Firstly, the Macho Brace could give you a one-stage attack boost along with its stat having effect. Item descriptions state that holding the Macho Brace promotes strong growth, so I would imagine a Pokemon to be able to hit harder as a result of that strong training. The Lagging Tail can make you always go last, regardless of Trick Room, but give you a 1.5 times physical defense boost. That does sound a bit broken, especially on already slow physical tanks like Toxapex, but choosing the Lagging Tail means that you lose that valuable leftovers recovery that most tanks tend to rely on. Lastly, the Iron Ball, while it has a fantastic 130 power with Fling, is only able to be used once, so you often end up just wasting a move slot. Being an incredibly heavy ball, it could also drop the opponent's speed by one stage and ground them for 3 turns upon being flung. They're not absolutely massive changes, and definitely aren't going to make them top tier picks, but I think they'll make some people at least consider using them, rather than staying as a group of niche at best options. The Generation 5 games are mostly known for 2 things. 1, being the objectively best games in the series, and 2, their unique and captivating story. However, one aspect that gets overlooked is the introduction of a gimmicky, pretty situational group of held items, being the Absorb Bulb, Cell Battery, Snowball, and Luminous Moss. Well, the last 2 were introduced a generation later, but you get the point. So, what do these items do? Well, they all raise a certain stat if hit by a certain move type. The Absorb Bulb raises special attack when hit by a water move, the Cell Battery and Snowball raise attack when hit by an electric and ice move respectively, and the Luminous Moss raises special defense when hit by a water move. The stat boost sounds pretty great at first, but really, why would you ever use it when you can just use a boosting move or a Life Orb? I think some ways to make them desirable is to first reduce the damage of the respective type by 33% upon being hit by the attack. I initially thought about making them a straight-up immunity to the type, but then that kind of kills the function of the type berries. 33% is lower than the berries' 50%, but you also get that nice stat boost, and it still works against neutral hits. The other buff I'd give is to have them automatically activate in a specific weather. The Cell Battery could activate in the sun and electric terrain, the Absorb Bulb and Luminous Moss in the rain, and the Snowball in hail. Game Freak had a great idea with these items, allowing you to exploit certain types of moves, but in practice, having to take a full-on hit first kind of defeats their purpose, leaving them to be exclusively used in only the bravest of gimmicks. These last few items I'm going to be talking about are ones whose effects are exclusive to specific Pokemon. While there are many Pokemon exclusive items that are pretty bad, like the Leak and Deep Sea Scale, I want to focus on the 3 worst offenders. The first 2 are exclusive to Ditto, the Metal Powder and Quick Powder. Looking at their descriptions, they seem like they fit Ditto well. with the metal powder doubling its defense and the quick powder doubling its speed. The problem is, once Ditto transforms, it loses that boost. To give them credit, the reason why they're useless now is simply because they're outdated. In Gen 5, Ditto was given the hidden ability Imposter, which gives Ditto a free transform whenever it switches in. These powders were clearly made to give Ditto a fighting chance when it had to manually transform. But what if you don't want to use a Ditto with Imposter? What if you want to use Ditto in a playthrough and can't obtain an Imposter Ditto? Well, to make them more enticing to consider, for the metal powder, how about instead of doubling Ditto's physical defense while untransformed, it always gets a stat boost. When not transformed, Ditto gets a 2x overall defense boost, a bit like its original effect in Gen 2. And when transformed, that resistance goes down to 50%. The quick powder, on the other hand, won't give a speed boost immediately, but grants Ditto a 2-stage speed boost upon using transform. This way, the opponent doesn't just get a free turn to set up against Ditto or switch out, and you still have to strategically live one turn as a weak Ditto. The catch is, for both of these items, you have to use Transform to get that stat boost. It doesn't work on Imposter Ditto. I'm not sure how commonly used Limber Ditto will be, but these changes would hopefully at least give Ditto some reason to be used in a regular playthrough. But I don't know if the same can be said for this last item. Let me talk about by far the most unnecessary held item in all of Pokemon. It's one whose entire existence is just baffling, going against the very grain of the single Pokemon who can even use it. It's an item that's so elusive in most games that you'd probably cruise through the entire series without ever seeing it. Not that you need it. I'm talking about Chansey's Lucky Punch. All this item does is increase Chansey's critical hit rate, which is clearly a perfect fit judging its incredible offensive presence. The worst part is, it's only functional when held by Chansey, not Blissey or anyone else who'd benefit from it even slightly. I also don't know why they decided to make such a counterintuitive item so difficult to get in most games. I mean, I guess it could give Chansey some attacking power with special moves, but most people probably just want to use a held item that'll help out Chansey defensively, like a Leftovers or Eviolite. So how can we make the Lucky Punch actually usable? The first change would obviously be to allow the entire Chansey line to use the Lucky Punch. As it is now, there's literally no downside to letting Blissey, and especially Happiny, use the Lucky Punch. But I don't know, let's say you're a crazy person who wants to use Chansey or Blissey offensively. Perhaps the Lucky Punch could be reworked so that every time Chansey or Blissey takes damage at all, both of its attacking stats are doubled. Imagine it as being able to land a Lucky Strike in desperation. That sounds like an absolutely insane buff at first, and it would be completely busted on any other Pokemon. But remember, this is the Chansey line we're talking about, where you're working with base 35 and 75 special attacking stats, as well as pitiful speed stats. Even with 2x special attack, Blissey is still probably not dealing a ton of damage. Using Lucky Punch also means that Blissey can't hold Leftovers and Chansey can't hold Eviolite, severely limiting their defensiveness. But hey, it'll at least give the Lucky Punch some tiny use. Maybe in a playthrough, you could poison Blissey before a fight and turn it into a special attacking powerhouse, or switch into a special attacker to get a free boost. But that's all of the items for now. As I slowly fade back into the digital abyss, I have to ask, what do you think about these changes? What changes would you personally make? What other useless items do you think need fixing? Or maybe you want to say that these buffs are a bit overkill, but that's up to you guys to decide. Either way though, they definitely breathe some life into what are currently the most dead, useless items in Pokemon.